So we're very, very excited today to have a great interview with Christopher Chung. He is the CEO of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. Chris, thank you very much for making time in your incredibly busy schedule to be with us today.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. Good to be with you.
And I had just some questions. What I really wanted to do today for our audience is to go through, of course, about you and your background, your connection with Japan, and also, really get into what economic development is all about in the state of North Carolina and how EDPNC came to be and everything like that. So just to start off, could you, of course, tell me about EDPNC and that EDPNC stands for Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, and specifically how it was started.
Sure. And
your mission in North Carolina.
Sure. So I'll start with our mission, which is probably the most important thing. We've got about 65 employees plus a number of representatives who work for us on a contract basis around the world, including in Japan. But really for all of us on the EDPNC team, the hope is we wake up every morning with one mission in mind, which is to improve the quality of life and economic well-being for the 10.4, almost 10.5 million people who call North Carolina home. The way we try to approach that mission, of course, then spills out into the different functions that we are responsible for within the EDPNC, which I'll touch on in a real quick second. So the EDPNC, the organization, is just shy of 6 years old. It was officially opened its doors in October of 2014, basically inheriting a number of functions that used to be performed within state government at the North Carolina Department of Commerce. I think 6-7 years ago, North Carolina, like many states have done already, was taking a look at, well, we know we've got a good product in terms of our state, but are there more creative or innovative ways we can go out there and promote this product in a way that leads to economic development success? And the long story is that led to the creation of the EDPNC as a nonprofit organization that does this work on behalf of the state of North Carolina through a contractual arrangement with the state. The work that we do, the functions that we inherited from the Commerce Department 6 years ago, fall into 5 different areas. Business recruitment is what we're best known for. And that involves trying to attract companies. They could be US companies, they could be internationally based companies, but either way, we're trying to attract those companies to set up new operations in North Carolina. That could be pharmaceuticals, that could be automotive parts manufacturing, aerospace, food processing, it could be a company's corporate headquarters, it could be a technology center. But those types of operations are what our business recruitment team is constantly working on, trying to essentially get us in the game for those projects, but also to try to, of course, win those projects and recruit them here. That function probably gets the most attention and visibility for the organization, but it's not the only way that economic development gets approached through our mission. We also have a team that's focused on supporting the growth needs of existing companies in the state. As important as it is for us to attract new employers here, we never want to forget about the vastly larger number of companies that are already here. Either they started here or they moved here a long time ago, but those companies, they don't need the sales pitch on why North Carolina. They've already taken that leap of faith. We just want to make sure we're removing any obstacles that they have to continuing to grow in our state. The third area that we focus on is international trade or export assistance, where we're helping North Carolina companies, oftentimes in manufacturing, to tap into new markets around the world. North Carolina is, of course, a big market, and the United States is a huge market, but that's not where the universe of opportunity ends if you're a successful manufacturing firm in North Carolina. But the kinds of companies we help, small, medium-sized manufacturers, they typically don't have the global reach and global distribution that, of course, a much larger company would have. And so our team is helping them figure out, one, are they ready to export? Are they ready for that big step in their growth? Two, if so, where in the world might make the most sense given their product or service? And then three, what's the best way to enter that market in a way that's going to lead to long-term success for customer development? So that's a very important part of what we do as well. It's very international. The fourth area is, it's actually our smallest function, but it's small business startup counseling. Every year we field close to tens of thousands of calls from individuals who are looking to launch a new business in North Carolina. So this is your would-be entrepreneur. It could be a serial entrepreneur, but basically someone who has that idea of starting a business somewhere in North Carolina, and they need some help around those first few technical steps that individual has to take. So permits, licenses, any special legal considerations, our team is fielding those calls from individuals looking to understand what the obligations are in North Carolina, and then we provide that information and we refer them to other small business startup resources that can help with financial access or marketing or business plan writing, and hopefully many of these individuals go on and create a very successful business down the road. Fifth, last but not least, especially as we've seen these past 6 months, is tourism marketing. Our Visit NC function is responsible for promoting North Carolina as a leisure travel destination. North Carolina is very lucky to get tens of millions of visitors every year, at least before COVID, obviously, but tens of millions of visitors every year exploring our mountains, our beaches, our golf, our barbecue, all those great things that make up the leisure travel experience across North Carolina. We're responsible for driving greater awareness of North Carolina and what it has to offer among the traveling public, in hopes that those folks will come here and spend their time and spend their money. And tourism is big business. It supported about 250,000 jobs across the state last year. And we've definitely, unfortunately, seen a major impact to that sector of our economy as a result of the pandemic. So those 5 functions, again, that's about as small of a nutshell as we can get it into, but those are the ways that we wake up every day across our very diverse mission to try to help North Carolina and North Carolinians improve their economic quality of life.
Well, thank you. No, that's an incredible summary. And, speaking from our side at the Japan Center, I mean, in talking about incumbent businesses, right? Businesses that have made the investment and created the jobs here in North Carolina. I can speak from my experience to that, working with Corey Howard, you're a Director of Business Development there at EDPNC, very committed to going out to, on our side, the Japanese businesses who have made a home in North Carolina, and seeing how EDPNC and we can also help them to drive their mission and their business plans. So
absolutely. And Japanese companies, as you know, are a huge contributor to North Carolina, and both in terms of investment and employment. I don't remember when the first Japanese company set up a shop here. It was easily decades ago, but today you've got hundreds of Japanese companies employing, I think, close to 25,000 individuals across North Carolina in manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, technology, et cetera, et cetera. And I know Japan Center, of course, does a lot of work supporting those companies and the needs of their employees. So thank you for everything you all are doing.
Thank you. And talking about another section that you had mentioned about the overseas offices of EDPNC. So we know that that's a big part of of your mission and your overall structure there. So you did touch about this a little bit, about what function they perform in terms of being able to field companies in that region to come to North Carolina, and then also to be able to, on the receiving end, talk about things coming from North Carolina, exports of services and products to that region.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically talking about the Japan office, right, in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
What mission have they been serving over the, however long they've been in existence?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So just to point out, so the 3 different ways that our foreign representatives help us, as you said, one is inbound foreign direct investment, where we want to get those international companies to set up in North Carolina. The second, as you mentioned, is helping North Carolina companies export overseas. We actually have some representatives overseas who also focus on driving travel and tourism visitation from overseas, on the notion that international travelers tend to spend a lot more money when they visit a location in the U.S. because they're staying for longer. So we want to make sure we're capturing the tourism benefit of a global economy as well. So the Japan office historically has performed both a trade, i.e. export assistance function, as well as an investment, i.e. foreign direct investment function. It has actually been the only office that historically has, only representative, I should say, who has fielded both of those roles for us at EDPNC in our brief history. However, I think as we look long term, that's an office that makes a whole lot more sense for us to do foreign direct investment. You just look at some of the demographic and economic trends of Japan, maybe more so than as an export destination for North Carolina products. It certainly makes that much more sense to focus on it as a source of inbound investment. So Japanese companies thinking about a global growth strategy, a localization, so build it where you sell it type strategy. We feel like there's tremendous potential in spite of all the success North Carolina's had with Japanese companies already here, there's even more upside, we think, for getting even further Japanese investment. And so that's why we want to concentrate the Japan office really more on that foreign direct investment, inbound investment function.
Understood. So, and talking about Japan, I know that you have some pretty interesting ties to Japan yourself. Would you care to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my parents immigrated to the U.S. From Taiwan probably 50 years ago. I think my mom just told me this week was like her 50th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So my mom's in her early 70s, but my dad is close to 80. So him for the first few years of his life, and his parents certainly, they grew up in Taiwan under when Japan occupied the country from I think 1895 through the end of World War II. And so Taiwan always had a very good relationship with Japan. Still, of course, I think a very strong relationship right now. But upshot being that people like my grandparents' generation and my dad's for first few years of his life were educated in Japanese. Actually, it was more their fluent tongue, apart from their native Taiwanese dialect. And so there was always that in the background. For me, it was more about growing up in Columbus, Ohio. Suburb of Columbus, Marysville, Ohio, of course, is where Honda decided to manufacture motorcycles back in the 70s, eventually started making cars. They were really the first Japanese transplant to start car manufacturing in the United States, really, broke down that barrier for companies later on like Toyota and Nissan. But Honda started it all first with motorcycles, then with, I think, the Honda Civic or the Honda Accord. And so years later, as I was growing up in middle and high school, a lot of the kids who worked for Japanese expats who were brought over to manage or do engineering jobs at the plant, I just got to know them. This was the late 80s. Got to be friends with them, got to be interested in Japanese culture. At the time, Japan was really in an economic ascendancy in many ways, like how people probably saw China's rise in recent years. That was really Japan in the late 1980s. It made good sense, but it was more just some personal interest to study it. So started self-studying Japanese. I can't remember the name of the first book I used. It was probably like a Berlitz travel guide, or there's one of those kind of functional things, but that eventually morphed into more formal studies with a tutor and everything like that. Started in 7th grade, did a couple summers of self-study, and then studied it in high school, majored in it at Ohio State for college. And yeah, that's really it's by far the only second language that I can speak, and it's not even very good now for lack of use after the past 20 years. But that's the thing. No, it's really I've tried. There's so many more tools now, right? You've got apps on your phone and
Sure.
websites to practice. I just haven't been as disciplined about using those tools as maybe I could have over the past 20 years. But like I said, maybe there'll be a chance to use it someday in a future occupation.
Well, you absolutely, I mean, I know from talking with Corey, he always says Chris is very humble about his very good Japanese competencies. So, but you're right. I mean, in terms of accessibility of not only Japanese, but I mean, goodness, of course, Mandarin and other foreign languages is much more accessible now.
It is, yeah.
Than it ever has been. So I think that's really a good thing.
Would have been nice to have those tools back in when I was 14 or 13 or 14 starting to study for sure.
Understood. So getting back to more about what EDPNC is doing and your knowledge base there. That's one of the things that I really, when I first came here to the state and interfaced with Corey, seeing how much information, like this massive amounts of information that EDPNC has. So what I wanted to ask was, when did we first see significant investment coming from Japan into North Carolina? So you had mentioned, the first Japanese companies coming in, decades ago, perhaps I think it was the 1970s under Governor Hunt. He was really driving for more internationalization, getting away from the sole agricultural, base in the state. Do you have any information about when we really saw this big push of Japan coming into North Carolina and really bringing in some serious FDI?
Sure, that's a great question. Like I said, having only lived here myself for 6 years, I'm not sure when the seminal moment was for Japanese investment, but Governor Hunt was certainly right in pursuing it aggressively, creating great resources like the Japan Center out of a recognition that Japan is probably one of, if not the most important economic relationship that North Carolina enjoys. I think it was, in terms of what caused the Japanese investment to occur here in North Carolina, I'm guessing is very similar to what other southeastern states have seen, primarily in the manufacturing fields initially. You always probably had some of these big trading companies that were investing in interesting acquisitions or joint ventures or partnerships, but in terms of what we call greenfield investment, a company establishing a new production facility, I think a lot of that probably was spurred by that wave of Japanese auto manufacturers who migrated to the U.S. to, again, make product closer to where their customer were. And of course, Toyota, Honda, Nissan, while the auto assembly plants are not here in North Carolina, certainly those investments trigger a huge wave of suppliers and other related companies. And I suspect North Carolina, some of the first bids that we had for Japanese investment were the result of the automotive sector from Japan establishing deep roots in the U.S. economy.
Understood. So when we're looking over, let's say, the past 10 years in North Carolina, what are you seeing consistently being, I know Japan is usually in, let's say, the top 5 pretty consistently. What are we seeing really over the past 10 years on average being the main sources of FDI coming into North Carolina?
So I would say it's definitely still skews towards advanced manufacturing, which can encompass a lot of different sectors. Automotive, of course, is part of that. Aerospace, it's really hard to overlook the success, the tremendous success that Honda Jet has enjoyed there in Greensboro, as well as what that results in terms of just recognition of North Carolina within the broader Japanese business community. But you've got them, you've got Aichi and AW, of course, up in Durham. You've also got some recent companies like look at Astellas. It's a Japanese pharmaceutical company, of course. They have a ownership of Audentes Therapeutics, which is a gene therapy company that announced a new facility in North Carolina actually earlier in 2020. So it's really run the gamut. Again, it's things that take advantage of the unique advantages of what North Carolina has to offer as a business location, be that our talent pool, be that our East Coast location, be that our very competitive energy, business costs, and tax rates. What Japanese companies are ultimately looking for, 90% of that's very similar to what companies of any part of the world are looking for. They're looking for a favorable operating environment, which translates into the ability to hire, retain the best talent that they need to be successful. They're looking for cost competitive locations, again, be that energy rates, be that corporate taxes. Now, I think where North Carolina has a distinct advantage is you look at things like the quality of our education systems, you look at the well-renowned universities that North Carolina is home to, many of which, of course, are probably very well known to folks in Japan, and Duke University, Wake Forest, UNC Chapel Hill, to name a few. And then quality of life, I think with international companies, and Japanese companies are surely no exception, when it's an international company getting going in the United States, oftentimes there is at least a team, a handful of expats who will be coming over from wherever the source country is. And those expats are going to be really interested in understanding the livability of a particular place. Well, North Carolina, whether you're talking west to east in the Piedmont, the quality of life argument is hard to overlook or hard to overstate. Be that temperate weather, be that very good education and healthcare at the local level, be that very safe communities by and large. Not to mention things like, we got a lot of natural beauty, of course, which depending on who, but I think Japanese people can appreciate natural beauty coming from a very beautiful country.
It's pretty similar too. I mean, we have mountains, right?
Yeah.
Especially we have
mountains,
the beach. Yes.
Coast, and the golf is probably a lot more affordable here in North Carolina than would be in Japan. Barbecue, that's probably a toss-up between the kind of barbecue you can get in Japan versus the kind of barbecue you can get here. But other than that, yeah.
Okay. Well, no, and thank you for that. That's also very, very informative. So getting into, in normal times, right, as in non-COVID times.
Right.
Really, what are you seeing? And this, I think some of this might be specific to Japanese companies, or it might not be. But what are the biggest hurdles in terms of attracting Japanese companies, right, or other foreign companies to come to North Carolina? And what are also the biggest enticements? So you said about operating environment, the education, natural beauty. things like that. But specifically in terms of, really in terms of economic development itself, right? Like really getting them here and supporting them. What are the biggest hurdles? What are the biggest enticements? I know you touched on a few.
Sure.
I thought maybe you might have some further thoughts.
Sure. Well, let me try to remember what life was like before COVID, because it sure is hard, as I'm sure all of
Yes.
us can relate.
Yes.
In normal times, I would say a few of the barriers that even a state like North Carolina, which you would argue has been one of the most successful states just from an economic development standpoint, let alone with the recruitment and attraction of Japanese firms, even in spite of those uniquenesses to North Carolina, I still think the biggest barrier we face is there are still plenty of Japanese corporate decision makers who don't really know much about North Carolina, or what they know would qualify as pretty superficial knowledge, not enough certainly to tell them we absolutely have to be in North Carolina, right? If we had that kind of reputation, which I don't think any state does, then it would be very easy to compete and attract Japanese investment. The reality is, unless a Japanese executive has had cause to study here, visit here, do business here, chances are they're operating with a pretty superficial baseline of knowledge. They may know the Research Triangle Park is here. They may know Duke University is here. They may know Michael Jordan and his North Carolina roots, but it's going to be things of that nature, which, while that's better than negative connotations or perceptions, it's certainly not enough that makes it a slam dunk for us to automatically skyrocket to the top of the list that they're considering. Add to that the fact that there are plenty of our neighbors who are equally aggressive and equally interested on and equally successful in attracting Japanese investment. And you can see how we never want to take for granted the opportunities we get to court Japanese companies to come here. South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, they are some of the most aggressive states and most successful over the past several decades at getting Japanese investment as well. And so we've got our work cut out for us in terms of competition. Add to that the fact that we still, no Japanese executives ever going to walk in the door knowing as much about North Carolina as we want them to know about North Carolina to choose our state. And so part of that, having boots on the ground through our Japan office, having folks like Corey working in partnership with folks like you, is to educate and make Japanese executives aware of why this is the best location for them to expand in the US.
And, and you touched right at the end there, you touched on a little bit of that, really growing North Carolina's brand equity. Really, it really comes down to brand equity.
Absolutely.
And these are discussions that I've also had with, I think with you and also with Corey, is the fact that, yeah, I mean, you talk with Japanese executives and you say North Carolina, and there's going to be a list of probably 3 or 4 things that they say, right? It's going to be Michael Jordan, it's going to be Duke, it might be RTP. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you ask a lot of Japanese executives, just Japanese people in general, when you're looking for a place to really get out there and really get the most bang for your yen in America, where are you going? There's like, well, it depends on the sector, but they're looking at, New York, or they're looking at someplace, Silicon Valley, or this and that. These are great places, but North Carolina also has so much to offer. And
that's right.
Really, that's what I was kind of getting at there at the end, was what does EDPNC specifically have planned really to target Japanese companies? I mean, are there anything for the short term? And of course, we don't know what's going to happen with COVID. Right? No one does. Assuming that we get a vaccine, things start getting to whatever kind of permutation of normal that we're going to get to. What are the specific things for Japanese companies that you're looking at for the short term?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, certainly the inability to travel freely or to host people coming into the United States, for that matter, from other parts of the world, that really has all but eliminated the personal relationship building, personal contact that so much of this economic development profession has historically been based on. This tends to be a very extroverted, social group of people by and large, because it is think of it as a sales profession, right? Our job is to go out and sell North Carolina and all the advantages. And our tactics have by and large been predicated on in-person interaction. Folks like Corey We'll go over to Japan several times a year, linking up with our Japan office. Again, our Japan office is a huge asset for us in these times where we are unable to send anyone. But those offices, of course, have their limits, and it's always good if we are showing the kind of commitment that results in someone from over here in North Carolina making the trip to Japan, meeting face-to-face with companies who may be thinking about a growth or expansion plan and are interested in hearing more about why North Carolina would be the best location. A lot of that activity, of course, has come to a standstill, and we don't know when that will resume. In the meanwhile, there are ways, the way we develop that target list when we're able to do it in person, those tools and resources are still there. It's data intensive with a little bit of art mixed in there, right? If we had a crystal ball that told us all 200 Japanese companies that would need a US factory in the next 5 years, well, that would make it really easy. The reality is nobody has that information. You use different research databases, you put in some algorithms, not that we've developed, but ones that are available through a third party. You try to predict based on sales growth, based on their other locations. You try to predict which ones may be in the market, and you reach out to them and say, hey, are you interested in meeting with us, connecting with us to learn more about North Carolina, so we can also learn about what you're planning to do, and hopefully there's a fit. That's kind of the long and short of it. You can still do some of those things in a virtual environment. It may lose a little something by not being able to do it in person, but can we be partially effective even in COVID-19? Absolutely. And I think unfortunately, it's not just something North Carolina is dealing with. That's pretty much all of our competitors are dealing with these new limitations and making the best they can in this meanwhile to reach out, stay in front, stay top of mind to companies that we think might be interested in expanding. And hopefully when this is all passed, we can pick up those personal interactions that can lead to deals, and that can lead to us competing to attract these companies.
Well, Chris, again, thank you so much for your time today and for your thoughts in this area and talking to us about EDPNC. I'm very motivated to help in any way that we can at the Japan Center to in these directions that you're talking about, and really making, I think the best phrase you use, in my opinion so far, is top of mind. Really making sure that we're, like you said, out in front,
right?
And we're proactive and aggressive. So.
Right. Well, let me just say back to you. I mean, Japan Center, especially with your leadership over the past few years, I mean, it's always been a valuable partner. I think even before EDPNC, always been a valuable asset for us as we try to attract Japanese investment. Our job at EDPNC is try to figure out how do we make even more use of these partners, and you've been so willing to do that. So we really appreciate the partnership, and I think we're going to continue to be able to accomplish some great things even in the middle of this unprecedented pandemic. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Likewise, thank you, and thank Corey, and of course John Black and your whole team, and
absolutely,
I'm looking forward to working together with you in the future. So please,
that sounds good.
Stay safe, and thank you again for today.
You as well. Thank you, Jonathan.